Hi, Grandma here, and I'm reading The Golden Goblet, and today I'll be reading from chapter 11. In chapter 10, Ranofer has discovered that Gaboo has a goblet, a golden goblet that looks like it had belonged to a pharaoh. But when he went to leave the room, he also discovered that Gaboo had sealed the room with a piece of clay and an imprint of his ring. So he has broken that seal, and now Gaboo will know that someone was in the room. It was a sound on the street outside that finally roused Ranofer. He sprang into the dark passageway and flattened himself against the wall, listening to footsteps draw nearer and nearer, then pass and begin to recede down the street. Letting out his breath with a rush, he stumbled back to the door. Somehow he must mend that seal. He knelt to examine it. It had broken in the middle when he forced open the bolt. A lump still clung to the bolt itself, and a smaller one to the socket on the door frame. When the door was closed, a jagged crack would show plainly between the two lumps. The clay that had filled it was now scattered in dry crumbs on the floor. Standing in the passage, he closed the door gently, and in the process shut off every glimmer of the moonlight, which was all coming from Gaboo's room. He could feel the crack, but he could no more see it than he could see through the wall at his side. There was no help for it. He must have a light. He had no idea where Gaboo kept his fire, drill, and tinder. They had not turned up in any box or chest in the room. It would take time to search for them, more time to kindle a torch, and time was what Ranofer did not have. He must fetch a light. That meant venturing outside into the street and the Keft-haunting night. This time, there is a moon at least, he thought, and it is not really so late or dark or silent as that other night. This time I shall be braver. I have to be, and there has to be a torch burning somewhere. Quickly, he opened the door again, gathered the scattered crumbs into a little pile with the aid of the moonlight. It was dim enough at best, and he had to feel anxiously into the shadows to be sure he'd not missed some morsel of clay. Then he flew down the stairs and into the nearest of the storerooms. Again by touch, he located the oil pot in which several torches soaked head down. He snatched one and, shivering with dread, forced his reluctant feet across the courtyard and out the gate. A glance showed one torch burning on a wall bracket by a doorway far down the canyon-like street. He ran silently toward it, expecting each moment to hear the eerie flutter of Keft's invisible wings, or feel its fleshless fingers on his throat. Once he glimpsed a moving shadow near an alleyway and sped faster, telling him forcefully that it was a cat. Cat or Keft, by the time he reached the distant doorway, he was weak with fright, but he thrust his torch into the flame, made himself wait while it caught well, and whispering what he could remember of the incantations against the evil spirits, stumbled back the way he had come. Safe once more inside the court, he leaned a moment, panting against the wall. He had fetched the light. He had not been seen. The Kefts and cats had stayed away. Now, if only Gaboo did not come back and catch him at this. He hurried upstairs to the door and thrust the torch into the wall bracket beside it. Scooping the clay crumbs into his palm, he spat on them, softened and mixed them with a careful finger, then pressed them into the crack, smoothed the edges as well as he could. A sliver of palm fiber off the torch handle made a poor enough engraving tool, but it was all he had. With it, he scratched in the missing bits of the scarab mark. It was done, but his heart sank as he saw how crude the patching looked. It would never pass Gaboo's inspection. I must run away, he thought. Gaboo will kill me. I must go quickly. But where? He had no place to go, and the night was thick with dangers. Stumbling with fatigue and with the trembling weakness which follows fright, he went downstairs once more, extinguishing the torch and replaced it in the oil jar, then flung himself on the familiar roughness of his mat. He would rest here just a moment. Then, calves or no calves, he must slip away through the streets and perhaps steal on board a Nile boat bound for Memphis or Abydos in the morning. Perhaps an hour later, a sound in the darkness brought him up upright. Had he slept? He must get out of here now, at once. He sprang to his feet, then froze at the sound of a muffled crash upstairs, followed by a stream of oaths. Gaboo was home. He had seen the seal, and it was too late. He ran toward the gate, only to whirl and run back again as he heard the upstairs door crash back against the wall, and Gaboo's staggering footsteps sound in the passageway. Gaboo was very drunk. He stumbled and half fell down the stairs, cursing at the top of his voice. Ranofer shrank into the darkest corner of the courtyard, wishing he could disappear into the bricks of the wall. He heard an angry, sleepy voice from the next house. "Quiet, son of a pig! Can't a decent man rest?" Gaboo roared some blurred profanity in answer. Ranofer, pressing still closer to the wall, watched the gleam of moonlight on Gaboo's shanty as he wavered across the courtyard and into the storeroom. There was the familiar sound of a mug clinking against the water jug, then a tinkling crash of broken pottery. Gaboo emerged and stood a moment, swaying. Then, miracle of miracles, he staggered to the stairs and climbed unsteadily up them. A moment later, the door of the upper room banged shut. Stunned at first, Ranofer gradually realized he was safe. Gaboo had not even noticed the seal. He had been too drunk. The boy's breath escaped in a quivering sigh. He left his corner and went back gratefully to his mat, thanking all the gods of Egypt for the invention of barley beer. Weary, sore, and still supperless, he fell at once into exhausted sleep. He was roused at daybreak by the usual rude dig of Gaboo's sandals in his ribs. "Up with you! Make haste to the shop! You can buy a loaf on the way!" Gaboo tossed a copper to the paving. Ranofer groped for it, rubbing his eyes with his knuckles, stumbled across the courtyard, still half asleep. The cold water on his face helped wake him, and a careless touch on his hurt lip jogged his memory. Something important had happened. Suddenly he was wide awake, remembering everything: the seal, his fear, the golden goblet. Last night he'd been too concerned with immediate problems to think about the goblet. Now it filled his mind. He hurried down the street of the Crooked Dog and into the dusty thoroughfare, which was stained pink with dawn, already dotted with scurrying figures of men on their way to work. He knew he must eat. He was too foggy with hunger now to think what his discovery meant to him. Near the street of the sailmakers, he spied the baker's boy, Kai, emerging from his master's shop with a laden basket on his head. Kai turned at Ranofer's hail and lowered his basket. "Yesterday's baking," he remarked laconically. "No matter," Ranofer retorted. "I have yesterday's hunger." He snatched one of the flat, round loaves, bit ravenous through the glazed crust, handing Kai his copper. "You get 2 for a copper when they're yesterday's," Kai said. He handed over another loaf, started to raise the basket to his head again, and hesitated. "Oh, take 3. Nobody need know of it. You had best put Nile water on that broken lip of yours." With a sympathetic glance, Kai hurried off. Ranofer tucked the 3rd loaf into his sash for midday and went on, more slowly now, toward the shop, eating as he walked. It is the most important thing that ever happened, finding that goblet, he was thinking. I will be free now, and Gaboo will hang head downward from the palace wall. It is right. It is just. He stole a treasure from the precious habitation of the great king. That is a terrible, evil thing to do. I will tell someone right away. I, Ranofer, the son of Thutra, will make the crime known. And then the soldiers will come out of the palace and snatch Gaboo, and he will be gone forever. He will never beat me anymore, and I will be free of him, and free of the stone shop, and everything will be like a wonderful dream. All Egypt will thank me. Pharaoh himself will thank me. He will summon me to his courtyard for the shower of gold. He will hang golden collars around my neck and order flowers strewn in front of me and tell Zhao he must take me as his pupil. I will be rich and happy and eat roast waterfowl every day. I have only to tell this thing. An old familiar question broke in on his daydreams. How was he to tell of it? Take the goblet from the chest and show it to a soldier? But he would be accused of stealing it himself. Go to some noble then, or seek an audience with a priest of Ammon. Impossible. An insignificant stonecutter's apprentice will get no further than the first guard. Even if he managed to tell someone there would be Gaboo to deal with, would anyone take an apprentice's word against his master's? No, it would be he, not Gaboo, who would end up hanging from the palace wall. It was all the same as before when he wanted to tell about the wineskins. The questions had no answers, the problem no solution. Nevertheless, he worried it as a dog worries a bone. While he doled out cutting sand for old Zahotep's drill, suddenly at mid-morning the idea came like a flash of sunshine. Zhao, the goldsmith, was known at the palace itself. The soldiers would trust his word, but would Zhao trust Ranofer's word? Ranofer was not sure. Still, Zhao might believe if he held the goblet in his hand. Surely he would believe then. The first step was to steal the goblet out of the chest. "The sand, boy, the sand!" Zahotep's voice crackled with impatience. "Do you think this drill is made to toy with like a lotus flower? If Pai sees me idle here..." Ranofer hurried forward with the pinch of sand. Zahotep set the bit of drill into the hole again, still grumbling. "If the master were here, I'll wager you'd need no reminding." Yeah, where was the master? Ranofer thought as he stepped back. Gaboo had not appeared this morning, though it had been his custom lately to come early in the shop and stay most of the day. He might show up midday, but if he did not, the noon hour would be a perfect chance to slip away home and take the goblet. Gaboo did not show up at midday. After waiting a last nervous few minutes, Ranofer wandered casually from the shop and, once out of sight, ran like a hare. He shrank from the very thought of breaking another door seal and repeating the nerve-wracking process of mending it, but there was no other way. Breathless, he reached the courtyard gate, pressed his ear against it. All was still. Cautiously, he stepped inside, padded across the empty court, and listened again. Then he climbed the steps, silent as a wraith. Immediately he knew that Gaboo was gone, for the door at the far end of the passenger was bolted on the outside. But wonder of wonders, it was not sealed. The gods were with him. An instant later, he was inside the room, searching frantically through the wooden chest. The goblet was gone. Dazed by the collapse of all his hopes, yet another time Ranofer started back to the shop. So certain had he been of finding that goblet waiting for him that even now he could almost feel it in his hands. Where had it gone? Maybe into some melting crucible, though it made him sick all through to imagine it. Maybe into a bale of linen in the hold of some northbound Nile boat, probably Setma's, to be sold in some city downriver, or even in Crete, or Phoenicia, or Mycenae. In any case, he would never see it again, and soon Gaboo would be wearing a fine new armband and swaggering when he walked. From habit, Ranofer's feet took him along the thoroughfare, past the lane that led between the flower fields, toward the river. But his mind was so full of the goblet and his despair that when the ancient suddenly appeared from the lane and hurried toward him, he had to stare a moment to realize who it was. Then he wanted only to escape. He could not tell anyone about the goblet. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. And I'm going to stop there. I'll continue reading next time. Bye-bye.